Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into the story behind a really major moment in missionary history, the creation of the China Inland Mission by James Hudson Taylor.
We're looking specifically at Taylor's own words from his memoir, A Retrospect. We'll trace his early sense of calling and then this growing feeling he had that something totally new was needed to reach inland China.
Exactly. Our goal here is to really understand the personal stuff, the experiences, the beliefs, the roadblocks that pushed him to start this huge organization. It's more than just history. It's about the personal journey that, sparked a movement affecting so many people. Okay, let's unpack this. It really starts quite young with this moment of dedication. What happened?
Well, Taylor writes about this leisurely afternoon, not long after he converted. He felt this really strong desire to just give himself completely to God. He prayed, asking for some work to do for him, something sacrificial, even if it seems small or tough, just to show his love and thanks.
And it sounds like it hit him really hard. He talks about this powerful feeling, like a deep certainty that God accepted his offer. He even lay down, just overwhelmed by God's presence and this intense joy. That's quite an experience.
What's really striking is how lasting that moment was for him. He said, "The deep consciousness that I was no longer my own took possession of me, which has never since been effaced." So it wasn't just about doing good things. It was a total shift in how he saw himself, his purpose. It became like the foundation for everything else.
And pretty soon after that, this idea starts forming. China, which, as he points out, was way harder to get into back then. Dangerous, not much known about it. Even finding info on existing missions was tough. Why China, do you think, so early on?
That's a really interesting point. Despite all that, the danger, the lack of info, this idea about China just took root. It suggests a very strong internal compass, a calling that went beyond the practicalities and the risks he could see at the time.
So he tries to find out more, borrows Medhurst's book on China from his minister. And that conversation, it really highlights this clash between Taylor's fiery young faith and the more established view. Tell us about that.
Right. So Taylor tells the minister he feels called to China and plans to go without purse or scrip, basically, trusting God entirely for money. The minister.
Pretty dismissive. He basically said, well, that was fine when Jesus was around, but, not now.
Wow. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? People with radical ideas often hit that kind of skepticism. Makes you wonder how many big ideas get squashed early on. But Taylor's reaction, wow. He later wrote, "I am more than ever convinced that if we were to take the direction of our master more fully as our guide, we should find them to be just as suited to our times." It's quite a statement.
Absolutely. That interaction really cemented his belief in relying directly on God, the whole apostolic model as he saw it. Like how Jesus sent out his disciples, trusting God, not fundraising first. This became a core principle for the China Inland Mission later. It was a definite break from how some other missions worked then. But Medhurst's book, even though the minister doubted the method, did point him in a practical direction, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Medhurst highlighted how useful medical skills could be in China, opening doors, building trust. So Taylor thought, okay, this is practical. It led him to start studying medicine as part of his preparation.
So even with this strong calling, he wasn't just rushing in. He took practical steps. His parents gave him good advice, too. Work on body, mind, heart, soul, while waiting prayerfully. What did that actually look like?
That preparation phase was really key. He wasn't just waiting around. He deliberately worked on his fitness, gave up comforts like his feather bed to toughen up, and he threw himself into service, handing out tracts, teaching Sunday school, visiting the poor and sick.
And then the formal medical training in Hull. Sounds like he got real hands-on experience there.
He definitely did. He assisted a doctor and worked as a surgeon for factory workers, saw a lot of accidents, so he got good practical minor surgery skills, which would obviously be vital later in China.
And alongside the practical skills, he was digging deeper spiritually, right? Studying scripture, evangelizing, being more deliberate about giving away what he had. Sounds like he was really trying to live it all out.
Exactly. It was all about integrating his faith with the practical side. Not just thinking about it, but doing it through service and sacrifice.
Then there's this other layer, studying about the second coming of Christ. That really seemed to light a fire under him, adding a sense of urgency. How did that belief change his actions?
Yeah, that's fascinating. This theological idea became a huge motivator for how he lived day to day. He saw Christ's return as this great hope, fueling his dedication and service and offering comfort in tough times. It wasn't just some abstract concept.
No, it had real-world impact.
Yeah.
He talks about going through all his stuff books, clothes, asking if he'd be okay accounting for them if Christ came back right then.
And he actually did something about it. He got rid of a lot of books, gave them away, found better uses for clothes. He even said doing this kind of clear out always brought him immense spiritual joy. It shows that direct link between what he believed and what he did.
It's quite a picture, isn't it? Living with eternity in mind, shaping your everyday choices. And this view seems to broaden his perspective about the church as a whole.
Yes, he started thinking about the potential if all the church's resources were properly used. He saw so much need poverty, people who hadn't heard the gospel, and compared it to the resources he felt Christians had. That planted the seed that maybe a better way to mobilize those resources was needed.
Which leads us to a major turning point.
Yeah.
He gets sick, has to leave China after 7 years. That must have been devastating, especially leaving that young church in Ningpo.
Oh, undoubtedly. A huge disappointment. And being told you couldn't go back for years. A massive blow. But amazingly, this setback is what actually led to the China Inland mission. It's a classic example of how bad news can sometimes, push things in an unexpected, bigger direction.
It really is. Being back in England, away from the day-to-day work, seems to have given him a wider view, literally looking at that big map of China in his study.
Exactly. Suddenly he's confronted daily with the scale of the need in the interior, places no one was reaching. And since he couldn't physically go, prayer became even more central, his lifeline, really, for dealing with that burden.
He wasn't just sitting around, though. He got involved in revising the New Testament in the Ningpo dialect. That must have been incredibly intense work with the scriptures.
Absolutely, just immersing himself in God's word. He later saw that time as crucial preparation for leading the CIM. He realized that getting workers wasn't primarily about fancy appeals, but about deep prayer and the church becoming spiritually stronger.
He comes back to that core idea, doesn't he, that the apostolic plan was to go and do the work, trusting in his sure word. It's such a consistent thread.
And even while in England, he saw prayers answered for workers for Zhejiang province, proof that God was already working, even before the CIM was officially formed. Those must have been encouraging signs.
But starting a whole new agency, just for the interior, that was a huge leap, right? It didn't just happen.
No, definitely not. It took months of earnest prayer and not a few abortive efforts. He had key friends praying with him, people like Reverend Guff and the Burgers, and crucially, his wife, Maria. He trusted her judgment immensely.
They must have known it could be tricky, potentially stepping on the toes of existing missions.
That was a real concern. But ultimately, they felt led to just trust God to provide the people and the money for this specific task without hurting other work. And Taylor increasingly felt he was the one meant to find and lead these new workers.
But he struggled himself, didn't he? He talks about unbelief hindering him. It's quite relatable that even someone like him had doubts.
Totally. He doubted if he could really lead, if he could support others. He worried that inexperienced people might crack under the pressure in China. It just shows the human side of it all.
But that burden for the perishing millions, it just became unbearable. He talks about feeling blood guiltiness, this intense spiritual agony walking on Brighton Beach. Can you imagine feeling that weight?
That was the breaking point, the moment of full surrender. He basically told God, okay, all the responsibility, the outcomes, that's on you. My job is just to obey and follow. And letting go like that brought immediate peace.
And right there, on the beach, he prays for a specific number, 24 workers for the inland provinces and Mongolia. And he actually wrote it down in his Bible. Why do you think writing it down was important?
Oh, writing it down. That makes it concrete, doesn't it? It's not just a wish, it's a specific request, a commitment. Putting down 24.
Right.
That sets a clear target, something to measure God's answer against. It focuses the faith, I think. And he says the peace he felt right after was just profound, completely different from the turmoil before. And he realized his prayer had shifted, not just send workers, but send workers, and I'll lead them.
So after that surrender, things start moving. Practical steps.
Yes. His wife, Maria, was crucial. Together, they wrote China's Spiritual Need and Claims, a powerful book born out of prayer explaining the desperate situation inland. And his friend Mr. Berger stepped up again, paid for thousands of copies to be printed. Taylor started speaking about it publicly, too, at conferences.
And prayer remained central, leading to people actually volunteering. They came to his home for training, did local outreach work. Sounds like a very grassroots, faith-led start.
It really was. A direct response to prayer, it seemed. This initial group started growing, and they needed more space in his house. This was the China Inland mission actually taking shape right there.
So looking back at the whole journey, It's quite something. From that initial teenage calling, the years of preparation, facing down skepticism being shaped by his beliefs, and then that seeming setback of returning to England. It all led to this unshakable conviction that a new kind of mission, totally reliant on faith, was needed for inland China.
Yeah, the real aha moment, I think, is his absolute insistence on trusting God for everything, money, people, and prioritizing those completely unreached areas. It wasn't about clever plans or big fundraising first. It was about obedience to what he felt called to do, trusting God completely no matter the doubts or difficulties.
It really does make you think, doesn't it? What convictions or burdens might be stirring in us, pushing us towards something new, some greater responsibility. And how can faith and just sheer perseverance help make that happen, even when we doubt ourselves or others doubt us? Just think about the incredible impact one person's commitment, born from personal conviction and fueled by faith, can have. It's a powerful reminder that maybe even huge challenges aren't impossible when you're driven by that deep sense of purpose and relying on something bigger than yourself.